March 10, 1876. Alexander Graham Bell spills battery acid on his clothes and shouts for help. That accident becomes the first sentence ever transmitted by telephone and changes human history forever. Imagine 1876 Boston. If you wanted to send a message across town, you had three options: walk there yourself, pay a messenger boy, or send a telegram. The telegram was revolutionary, but limited. Messages had to be short because you paid by the word. No emotion, no tone of voice, just cold, abbreviated text tapped out in Morse code. Long-distance communication meant waiting hours or days. If your grandmother was dying in another state, you'd receive the news too late. Business deals moved at a crawl. The human voice, with all its warmth, urgency, and emotion, couldn't travel beyond shouting distance. Alexander Graham Bell wasn't trying to invent the telephone. The Scottish immigrant was a teacher of the deaf, obsessed with visible speech and helping his students communicate. His mother was deaf. His wife was deaf. He was actually working on a harmonic telegraph, a device to send multiple telegraph messages simultaneously using different sound frequencies. In his Boston boarding house workshop, Bell and his assistant Thomas Watson conducted endless experiments. On March 10, 1876, everything changed. Bell was in one room, Watson in another, connected by a wire. Bell spilled battery acid on his pants and instinctively shouted, "Mr. Watson, come here, I want to see you." Watson burst into the room, not because of the emergency, but because he'd heard Bell's voice come through the wire. Not Morse code, not buzzes, actual words. The telephone was born, but here's what history books often skip. Bell filed his patent on February 14, 1876. Just hours before rival inventor Elisha Gray filed a similar design at the same patent office. Hours. And before either of them, an Italian immigrant named Antonio Mucci had demonstrated a working teletrofono in 1860, but was too poor to maintain his patent. Bell's patent would become the most valuable single patent in history, and one of the most contested. Bell's early telephone was barely functional. Voices came through faint and distorted. It only worked over short distances. When Bell demonstrated it at the 1876 Centennial Exhibition in Philadelphia, Emperor Dom Pedro of Brazil exclaimed, "My God, it talks." But most observers dismissed it as an electrical toy. The technology had serious problems. Bell's liquid transmitter was impractical. Then Thomas Edison, yes, that Edison, invented the carbon button transmitter in 1877, making voices clear enough for actual conversations. This is the device that made the telephone commercially viable. Western Union, the telegraph giant, rejected buying Bell's patent for $100,000. Their internal assessment called it an electrical toy with no commercial value. It's perhaps the worst business decision in history. Within a year, Bell Telephone Company launched in July 1877. The first telephone line was installed in 1877, connecting a businessman's office to his home. Revolutionary but limited. To call anyone else, you needed a separate wire to their location. Imagine having 50 phones in your house, one for each person you wanted to call. The solution arrived in 1878, the telephone exchange. New Haven, Connecticut got the first one, a simple switchboard connecting 21 subscribers. Now you could call anyone on the network. There was just one problem. Someone had to physically connect your call by plugging wires into the switchboard. Enter the "Hello Girls," thousands of women hired as telephone operators. It became one of the first major employment opportunities for women outside the home. By 1900, nearly 600,000 phones were in service, requiring armies of operators working around the clock. The job required incredible skill. Operators memorized thousands of numbers, connected calls in seconds, and maintained perfect politeness even when customers were rude. They became cultural icons, the voice of modern technology. The telephone created social chaos. How do you answer this new device? Alexander Graham Bell insisted on "ahoy," the nautical greeting. Thomas Edison lobbied for "hello," which before the telephone was rarely used. Edison won. Hello became the universal telephone greeting, transforming a rare word into the most common in English. But the real cultural disruption was the party line. In rural areas, up to 20 families shared a single telephone line to save costs. Your neighbors could, and did, listen to every conversation. Telephone eavesdropping became a national pastime. Gossip spread faster than ever. Privacy died. The telephone transformed courtship. For the first time, young couples could have private conversations without a chaperone in the room. Parents were horrified. Ministers preached against telephone romances. By 1910, the telephone proposal was common enough that newspapers ran advice columns about it. Emergency services were revolutionized, but slowly. The first police telephone system launched in 1878, but the universal 911 emergency number, not until 1968, 90 years after the telephone exchange. The telephone industry created and destroyed jobs on a massive scale. Telegraph operators became obsolete. Messenger services collapsed, but armies of new workers were needed. Telephone line installers climbed poles across America, stringing millions of miles of copper wire. Operators, repairmen, engineers, entire new professions emerged. AT&T, the American telephone and telegraph company, became one of the most powerful corporations on Earth. By 1910, they operated most phone lines in America. They weren't just a company, they were infrastructure. By the 1920s, AT&T was the most valuable company in the world. A monopoly so powerful, the government eventually broke it apart in 1984. The telephone connected America city by city. The first transcontinental call in 1915 linked Alexander Graham Bell in New York with Thomas Watson in San Francisco, recreating their first conversation across 3,000 miles instead of 3 feet. The telephone's design evolved from bizarre to boring to brilliant. The candlestick phones of the 1900s looked like steampunk sculptures. Rotary dials arrived in 1919. Suddenly, you could call without an operator. In 1963, AT&T introduced touch-tone dialing, replacing clicks with musical beeps. Each button plays 2 simultaneous frequencies, a clever way to prevent pocket dialing before pockets had phones. Cordless phones arrived in the 1980s, freeing us from wall-mounted tyranny. But the real revolution was already brewing. In 1947, Bell Labs engineers conceived the cellular concept. In 1973, Motorola engineer Martin Cooper made the first mobile phone call on a device weighing 2.5 pounds that looked like a brick. Commercial cellular networks launched in 1983. Early cell phones cost $4,000, equivalent to $10,000 today. Only wealthy business people could afford them. But prices dropped fast. By 2000, half of Americans owned cell phones. Then came January 2007. Steve Jobs walked on stage and said, "Today we're introducing 3 revolutionary products: an iPod, a phone, and an internet communicator." Pause. These are not 3 separate devices. This is one device, and we are calling it iPhone. The iPhone didn't just improve the telephone, it transformed it into something else entirely. Today's smartphones are supercomputers that happen to make calls. We video chat across continents, access humanity's entire knowledge base, navigate anywhere, and capture our lives in photos. All from a device smaller and more powerful than the room-sized computers of Bell's era. Traditional landlines are dying. In 2004, 90% of American homes had landline service. By 2024, fewer than 30% do. The telephone booth, once a symbol of modernity, has nearly vanished. There were 2.6 million payphones in America at their peak. Now there are fewer than 100,000. Today, there are 6.8 billion smartphone subscriptions worldwide, more than the number of people on Earth just a century ago. The telephone evolved from Bell's liquid-filled accident into the most ubiquitous technology in human history. It changed everything. Families separated by oceans could hear each other's voices. Businesses could operate globally. Emergency help was just 3 digits away. The telephone made real-time global communication possible, and that created the internet, video calls, social media, and the connected world we now take completely for granted. Alexander Graham Bell's patent 174465, filed on Valentine's Day 1876, became the single most valuable patent in history. But its real value wasn't measured in dollars. It was measured in every conversation that mattered, every "I love you" across distance, every emergency call that saved a life, every business deal that built the modern world. The next time you pull out your smartphone to text, video call, or scroll mindlessly through apps. Remember, it all started with a man spilling acid on his pants and yelling for help. Subscribe to see more stories of the accidental inventions that changed everything, because the best innovations often happen when someone isn't even trying.